mean, Kaz, you may want to start actually, because I know you're not that
Yeah,
newbie. But
I'm relatively new. I'm just over 2 months in. So hello everybody. I'm Kaz. I am a member of the comms team. I'm Leah's deputy. So hi to everyone. Lovely to meet you all. And I'm going to be jumping in and sort of hosting the call today because Leah's unable to join us. So hi.
thanks, Kaz. I'll hand over to you in a second. And Abigail, I know your hand went up, but did that go? Was that an accident, or did you want to say something?
That was an accident. Sorry, it was meant to be a reaction. Apologies.
I don't think you're that usual.
Nice to see
okay,
you.
well, nice to see you. Well, Kaz, shall I hand over to you then?
Yeah, that's fine. Hi, everybody. So thank you all for joining us at this month's time to talk with Tracey. So we're doing things a little bit differently today. So we're going to be hosting a culture special. So it's really exciting. So thanks everybody for joining us. So basically, this session will be not only sharing our feedback from the recent culture survey that you took part in, but also we've got a special guest panel. So we've got a couple of members of our executive team. We've got Neil, Claire and Paul, and obviously Tracey joining us to answer some of the questions that we had prior to this meeting, but there'll also be an opportunity for you guys to ask us a question as well as we go along. So you can either put your hand up and put your camera on, and we'll come to you, or you can just pop the question in the chat and I'll read that out to the panel and they will answer the question for you. So before we kick off, a little bit of housekeeping. It's lovely to see all your lovely faces now with your cameras on. But when we move into the second part of the meeting, if you could just switch your cameras off just so that we can concentrate on the speaker, that would be great. We will also be recording this meeting and sharing this on the internet after the meeting has ended. And also, just to reiterate the point that we're really keen to hear your questions as well as going through some of the questions that have been shared beforehand. If we don't get to answer all of the questions, don't worry. We will make sure that we publish those questions and the answers on our internet so that we cover everybody and we get all the answers to those questions. So just to give you an idea of the format for today, so I will be going across to Barbara, who will be giving us an update on the survey results. Then I'll be going to Tracey just to give us some reflections and thoughts about those results. We'll then be taking some questions with our exec team panel, and then we'll be summing up the call and summing up any next steps. Is that all okay? And before I hand over to Barbara, Tracey, is that okay from your point of view? Anything you want to add? We good to go? Perfect. Okay. So Barbara, can I hand over to you at that point? I know you've got a couple of slides to share with us as well.
Yeah, so hopefully, oh, there we go. I'm hoping that's working for people.
It is. We can see it. Well, I can see it. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you very much. So yes, this is really just a very, very quick run through on the Culture Pulse survey results. Slide first, which is to saying these results are actually going to be published on going up here, will be on the intranet. So just to give a quick sort of brief aims, we're going to share these organisational level results. Directorate results be communicated differently. We're going to update a little bit on the communication plans, and then that's going to lead into the executive reflection. And I think it's fair to say that the executive have already had a couple of good, honest discussions about some of this. And I know that a number of the questions that people have raised are actually questions the executive themselves have been raising and debating, hence the panel approach. So just to give you a very quick reminder, some of you will be new and won't have seen this, but when we did our original survey, it was back in 2023. And the tool that we've used presented the results a little bit like this. So pictorially, it shows on the left the culture as the organisation was in 2023, and next to it is what staff said they'd like it to be. And you don't need to go into a huge amount of detail, but just to say that blue here is representing cultures that are around achievement, around involving people, being affiliative, compassionate, and interested in growth. And so the greens are usually ones that are a little bit more sort of conventional, pulling us back a bit, and the red is sort of a little bit more aggressive, defensive. And so you can see that there's quite a gap between where we were and where we want to be. And that was, as I say, done in the early 2023. And What we then wanted to do is, because we know there's been a lot of local activity, so the results took a while to get out, and I guess by the end of 23, beginning of 24, we were really asking departments to do lots of local actions. And so what we wanted to do now was to actually see what impact we were having. And so we ran the pulse survey from 23rd of June to the 3rd of August. We were only able to measure 2 styles, one of which is the humanistic, encouraging one, which is where the organisation said it most wanted to be. And this is about, involving people in decisions that impact on me, being people-centric in our approach. And then the other style we chose was avoidance, because that was our biggest negative one. And this is about where people maybe feel disempowered or not involved or unable to highlight issues. So we took just 10 questions from those 2. And then we looked also at what impact our culture is having. So there's 3 outcome measures. So we were asking people, to what extent are you clear about your role in the organisation? Do you have sort of conflicting demands on you? And are we adapting to the changing needs of the customer? Now I'll go through those results in a minute. But what was really nice was in the Culture Pulse survey, we actually had a 39.5% response rate from the organisation, which is really good. And it meant that we had 852 responses compared to actually only 423 in the original survey. So there was a lot more engagement with this, which was a good result for us. And I think it shows that culture is definitely on our agenda. But interestingly, in terms of the results, these were the 5 questions. You'll be able to see that the mean score in 2023 and the change between 23 and 24. And in fairness, there's very little change. Very, very marginal ups and downs on a couple, but nothing sort of significant. So in some respects, the culture has stayed relatively static at organisational level, which largely reflects, I think, the views we've been getting from our staff survey as well, that, maybe things are improving, maybe expectations are higher than they were, but we haven't actually shifted much. In terms of the defensive style, the avoidance one, what was interesting here, we saw a couple of movers, slightly in a positive direction. People are less likely now to feel the need to push decisions upwards. And that's good, because that is sending a message that perhaps our delegation and our engagement and our involvement of people is improving. But there's still something a little bit about safety, I think, going on here, where people are saying, I think I maybe still need to shift responsibility. I'm a little bit uncomfortable perhaps about accepting sort of the blame or the responsibility. That still doesn't feel comfortable for me. So I think we need to sort of explore that a little bit. In terms of the outcomes, one of the bigger move actually is, to what extent do you clearly know what is expected of you as a member of this organisation? And that has been a relative shift in the positive direction. So we are obviously doing better on people understanding the expectation and the role clarity. In terms of whether or not people are still getting slightly confused messages, that hasn't really changed, nor has the view of the extent to which we are effectively responding to the needs of our customers. Again, no change, so no improvement, no sort of setback. So in a way, perhaps we haven't, culture change takes a long time, so perhaps some of this is understandable, despite the fact we know there's a lot of good local effort going in. One thing we wanted to do is look at it by managerial group as well. So we use the sort of the headings, to what extent does it look different if you're a colleague, a people manager, or an organisational leader? And here we do see some differences. So in general, organisational leaders are, I think, seeing things more positively. And that could be because, they are able to take on more responsibility. So we're seeing organisational leaders are saying, I think I can resolve conflicts more effectively, or I am certainly expected to, resolve conflict more expectantly. And we have put a lot of effort into our management and leadership programme, particularly at the higher level and through the academy. And hopefully this is actually showing us that some of those messages are filtering down into that leadership community. There's clearly more work to be done, though, to make sure that it then actually does permeate and change things for line managers and for staff. And when it comes to some of the more sort of defensive scores, we see a few little changes here. So again, we see that organisational leaders feel that they are less likely to sort of have to shift responsibilities upwards. But managers in the middle, actually, their scores are perhaps in the worst position, so to speak, in terms of they feel the need to shift responsibilities and push decisions upwards. And so for me, there's something, we've talked about this at the executive, that perhaps we need to do more to support our sort of middle managers, our line managers, in actually doing
The rental
stuff.
cost.
Yeah.
So they put it in.
Yeah.
So it
Oh,
could come.
I think we've got somebody else
90 days.
calling in
Neil.
on the. Yeah. And so the results of the managerial responsibilities, interestingly, no major shifts, except that actually it's staff, it's our frontline people who are more likely to say that they are able to meet the responding needs of the customer. And that again may not be surprising, because they're the ones who are actually probably dealing more day to day with what the organisation does, and feeling the effect, the impact of our work. So I guess a very, very quick summary would be that the response rate has increased, which we think is really hopeful. Whilst it isn't quite where we want it to be, we do know there's been a huge amount of collective effort, particularly through sort of local action plans and advocates, to help move things forward and create that sort of culture across teams. And we do know that it is a real priority for teams that have been sort of working through and sharing what they're doing locally. And the executives have shared their local action plans and what's working for them. We have seen some overall minor improvements, although when you get your directorate results, we will see that there are some more significant shifts. So when you average it out across the organisation, we haven't seen a major change, but within directorates, there have been some quite significant changes. And we do know that this sort of slightly static level at organisation level is consistent with the recent staff survey. And it really is about what more do we need to do to make sure that our actions do translate into results. And so the last slide for me is just to say a little bit about the communication. So obviously we've got this session today. The high level organisation results are going out on the intranet today. By the end of November, I think the 28th, we would like all directorates and divisions to disseminate their local results, so that you get to see how the shifts have been in your directorate or division. And in terms of transparency, we're going to publish all of the directorate and divisional results on SharePoint in January. And in terms of actions, obviously at local level, we would encourage people to think about what it's saying for you and to update and build on your existing action plans. And also the executive are going to sort of monitor progress through sort of mid-year and end-of-year reviews. So I'll stop at that point. I'll stop sharing and I'll hand back to Kaz. I don't think we want to get into too much discussion about the survey itself. And Peter and I will be happy to take any sort of more technical questions offline, because today's not about that. It's much more about how we want to take forward the leadership and the culture of the organisation. So I shall stop sharing and hand back to Kaz.
Great. Thank you, Barbara. Thanks. It's a really, really great summary of the results. Before I start going through the questions that we've had prior to the call and sort of discussing those with the panel, Tracey, do you have any sort of immediate reflections on the results that have been shared?
Yeah, and thanks, Barbara and the team. I think that the Culture Pulse survey I think it's really key for us to do a bit of a check-in. Firstly, it's fantastic that so many people are joining this call, because for me, symbolically, this is our organisation, and whilst it's good to see that there aren't major swings downwards, I'd like to have seen more movement towards the preferred culture that we all identified a couple of years ago, recognizing that Barbara, things take time, but for me, I feel really passionate about culture, because it's the kind of it's the what you see, how you feel, what you hear. This isn't a kind of checklist stuff. It's the kind of feeling you have in your workplace? I mean, of course, we're talking about the work environment, and yeah, stuff that goes on at home seeps in, of course it does. And I hope we're as flexible as possible to support people, all of us, when we're in those times. But it is that inner feeling, and there's the sounds, the symbols of feeling safe in the workplace and feeling supported and feeling that every one of us can come to work and be ourselves and not have to create a persona that's not natural for us. And the key, but also feel that we're supported, everybody's supported to be the best that they can be in whatever those career developments that people have. And I know whilst then we've got some really great examples of our values being lived, because this is all about our values, and they've stood the test of time, working together with trust and respect to make a difference. But we know that not everybody experiences that consistently across the organisation. And to me, the art of this, because it's not about a plan and a checklist, but there are actions we need to take to try and make it better where it's not as well experienced as others. But surfacing the conversations, having the conversations openly with teams, be it labs or screening or policy or estates, openly having those conversations and saying, so what is it that we need to do to make things better? How are you feeling? How safe do you feel? And I think that's the shift for me, is not feeling that you've got a job title, that you've got all the solutions. This is about all of us equally experiencing the culture that we want and moving it to the culture that we want. So I guess that's what I would say, and I would just really, really encourage people to have those open-ended conversations about, how do you feel, what could be better, and what are the solutions? Because again, this isn't about a high-level corporate plan that comes. That's not what this is about. This is about us all feeling able to take some ownership and control about our working environment, and expecting, everybody's a leader in my mind in the organisation, people with managerial responsibility, all of us, to actually create the working environments for people to feel as if we're moving to the preferred culture. So I'll maybe stop at that, Kaz, and hand back to you.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. So just as a reminder, so what we're going to do now is move into a few questions that we've had submitted before the call. And we've got Tracey, Neil, Claire, and Paul joining us from our exec team to answer those questions. But again, I'm going to keep banging that drum. If you have got any questions, please drop them in the chat or raise your hands and we will come to you. If you guys are ready then. So the first question that we had submitted was, what actions will you take to ensure leaders at all levels across our organisation demonstrate openness, warmth and availability? So is there anyone immediately wants to grab that question and give us a response?
I'm not answering all of them, team. The spirit of an open culture.
Sorry, can you just repeat the question? So warmth, availability and...
Yeah, it was what actions will you take to ensure leaders demonstrate openness, warmth and availability?
So it's a little bit of a twee answer, I suppose, but it's got to be by example, because you will hold us to account in terms of our actions as an executive team and how we expect that from our direct reports and from our directorates. So it's a little bit more tricky when a lot of us work online and we're an all Wales organisation, but an open door is an open door. And if people reach out to you for support and help, it shouldn't matter where they're reaching out for you, whether that's through our own teams or whether they're from other directorates teams, not to undermine usual reporting processes and, somebody coming to me because they're not getting the answer they want from their director, but just to share our expertise. We've all done lots of different jobs and we've got lots of availability of skill sets that we've built over our careers. But also, if you look back to the principles around compassionate leadership, it is being available to listen intently to people and to hear what they're sharing with you and what the essence of that message is. And I think if people are reaching out to you, it's because they've got something they want to share and they want your help or direction with. So there is definitely something here for me about availability, but also in that leading by example. And this is people being very genuine. So it's not just we want to do culture because Public Health Wales wants to do culture, but it is that real belief that if you cut us all down the middle, It's because we want to be a really good organisation that people feel part of the, the being of this organisation and want to be part of their success, and also want to help in areas which aren't, which are struggling. So I suppose for me, it's very much around, open door, leading by example, but actually, putting that evidence behind it. So walking the walk, really, which is it's more difficult to do when we're all busy and everybody's on, everything's on fire and we're putting things out like that game in the fair, one thing pops up and another thing pops up. But it is about taking that time. And even if you can't be available right now, carving that time out to say, can't do it right now, but I'm going to carve some time out to spend, and then expecting that of our teams.
I think you're on mute, Kaz. Well, we can't hear you there's a kind of audio thing happening with Teams at the moment. I think people are on mute.
Oh,
And that's
can
it.
you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. I've got Tracey and Neil both with their hands up. So Tracey, can I come to you first?
Yeah,
Your thoughts on
that makes sense.
question?
Everyone knows we're not going to contribute to everything. I agree with Claire. It's role modelling. It's role modelling as us as an exec team, as the wider leaders across the organisation. In fact, as all of us. And so, but creating that environment. I mean, I made the point earlier. I think it has to be about creating the environment, because, actually sometimes small changes change the dynamic for people feeling safer in a workplace, whether it's a team or a lab or an office. So I think that's fundamental. Is you can have one or two changes in a team can make a big difference. And so ensuring that the environment is seeking the views of people, enabling people to be curious, to be able to give views for solutions, respecting everybody's voice equally. It's not about bloody job titles, excuse my French. It's not about job titles. We've got the most amazing people with phenomenal professional and lived experience in all the different roles of the organisation, and everyone has an equal voice in contributing to culture. And people in more leadership positions, is about enabling those voices in an equitable way to come through. So I'll stop at that.
Thank you, Tracey. Neil, can I come to you and then I'll come to Paul? Oh, Paul, I'll come to you and see whether Neil wants to join in after that.
Neil does that to me in most meetings. Don't worry. It's fine. No, I think it's really important. It's a really important question, but I think openness, warmth, and availability is something that every member of our team should display in terms of their characteristics. It's not just a management leadership trait, albeit it's really important that it is there as well. What's really important for me, I think, from a cultural perspective in terms of leadership, is that everybody experiences the same culture, regardless of which part of the organisation you work in. So we don't have pockets of experience that isn't so good in one place and pockets of experience that is great in another. And that's what we need to do. And I think sheep dipping our leadership teams, our managers, those people with those line management responsibilities through a process that makes clear what our expectations on cultures and behaviours are for our managers and leaders is really important, and that's what we plan to do. So we are developing leadership development programs and encouraging our leadership teams to go on those programs to make sure that they do it. But isn't it amazing, really, to be part of an organisation that focuses in on its culture? It's quite refreshing. Lots of places, particularly in the private sector, the culture is the culture. You fit in or you don't fit in. And here it's completely different. Here the culture is what we need it to be for all of us to be our best, to do what we've got to do for the people of Wales. So it's amazingly it's a great privilege, really, to be involved in this work and to be in an organisation that takes it so seriously. So is Neil back?
No, I think we've lost Neil, but Claire, you've got... Oh, sorry, Neil, you're back.
I am back. The glamour. I'm currently in Cardiff City Stadium in a small room with a laptop on a load of yoga bricks. So apologies, the signal went off. So yeah, just to kind of pick up a couple of the points. I echo kind of the points that the colleagues have made, but for me it is about kind of just those real little things making a big difference. And I think there's something really for me important about we talk about kind of demystifying culture. Let's be honest, as an exec team, I'd love to say we've got all the answers. haven't. I think the reality is in this space as well that we are kind of grappling with things, we're learning, and we're kind of working through a range of things with you all and with our directorates. And the key for us is about pulling out the stuff which is really making a difference. And really driving those areas forward, because we've got pockets of kind of brilliant stuff and we've got pockets of stuff which just isn't where it needs to be. And the key for us now is to really build on that. But I think there's a real appetite, desire, and I think Paul's kind of referenced it. We are, yes, there's absolutely work to do, but we are in a really fortunate position that for everyone from kind of non-execs, from a chair, chief exec, and I think organisationally is really up for this this piece of work. And the little things make a real difference, and we all have a real role in this and really driving and taking this forward. But as you can probably tell, I'm hugely passionate about this, and being a kind of a great place to work is such an important thing for us. So there's just a couple of points from me, Kaz.
Great, thanks Neil, thanks for that. Claire, if I can come to you and your thoughts on this question, and then Andrea, I'm going to come to you if that's okay.
I think the other things I probably want to bring up is, and Paul mentioned it, it's about interest and passion. So if you look at it, we've got 123 people on this call. So there is a lot of people out there who are interested in what this organisation is doing around culture. But that does also make us available to have these conversations. And if you worked in a big health board, you wouldn't get this opportunity to get this conversation with each other, with our chief exec, with us and our focus, because we have this opportunity. So there's an opportunity here that maybe some other organisations don't have for us to get together and discuss this. There's something around us demonstrating what we're hearing in our culture. So we're hearing stuff that is unacceptable, and we're hearing a lot at the moment about people are tired, the agenda is a bit unforgiving, everybody's very busy. So we need to hear that, and we need to respond to that, and people in our organisation need to hear that we are responding to it, so that we're not just listening, everybody's tired, what are we doing about it? How do people see and feel things differently because we're responding to that? And I think the other thing comes on to a little bit about the stuff that Barbara presented, which in the culture survey and the really clever technical stuff around it, is it's the difficult conversation. So it's the taking the responsibility, and so good culture isn't always around the lovely soft cuddly stuff, which is the stuff we all love, but it is also about making difficult decisions and allowing people to flourish and allowing people to fail safely, and then giving them that feedback and support so that they can learn from that. So again, back to the compassionate leadership stuff, it's not all the soft stuff, fluffy stuff. It is about us having those really tricky conversations that make people better able to do their jobs in the future.
That's great. Thank you, Claire. Andrea, am I okay to come to you? I see you've got your hand up for a question there.
Yeah, can you hear me okay? Because I've been having some mic issues.
I can hear you because right. Okay.
Yeah,
I've got seen some thumbs up, so you're good.
In contrast to what Claire just said, I'm going back to the softly, I guess. I'm just thinking that if the organisation wants to head in the direction that the results have sort of suggested, that we also need to be, as leaders or managers, we need to be able to sort of be a bit more vulnerable as well, because there's nothing worse than if you're a person struggling, you look around you and you think everyone else has got it together and you're the only one that's crumbling. And just sometimes to know that other people are human and crumble as well can be quite powerful, and can help you to come out with whatever issues you're facing and to find solutions to those. So I think, whilst, we need to be effective managers and get the job done and all of that stuff, I think there is an element of showing that we're not always on top of our game. We don't always have all the answers. We don't always, we're not always finding it easy. That's it, really. That's just what I want to say.
No, that's great. Thanks for sharing that, Andrea. Tracey, do you want to come in on that?
Oh, well, firstly, Andrea, it's lovely to see you. I've seen you for a while. Yeah, I totally agree. I think vulnerability is really important. I'd like to think that we're moving beyond the kind of 1985 culture of, bravadoism. And that's just not, society's not like that anymore. None of our lives are like that anymore. And I mean, in a recognition that, however stable, as in things not changing too much that any of us are in our home life or work life, things come out from left field, don't they? And I think the minimum we can ask for is that people who we work with are saying, are you okay? and they're not saying, are you okay? Because it's just a thing to say. They actually want to hear the answer, recognizing that it could be them the following week. So, Andrea, I think you're absolutely right. You know, vulnerability, but I'm not saying everybody should overshare everything, but I think you and I are probably saying a similar thing. But, you know, that leadership is also about vulnerability, and it's part of the power base as well, that where, you know, people feel that they have to, you know, any of us have to say, look, I need some time off because something's happening with someone. You know, it could be me and Pippa, and Pippa's my line manager. It could be Rachel and Neil. It could be, you know, Andrew and Kieran. It shouldn't all just be one way, and that shouldn't be a power separation. You know, you'd want to know if the person who you're working with is also having a, you know, tough time, and how you support them, regardless of back to what our job titles were. So I think that's a really important part of culture as well. So thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you, Tracey. I'm going to just direct attention to the chat, because lots of people have been putting in some really lovely comments. But there's also a couple of questions in there. There's one from Lauren, which I know, Tracey, you've responded to, but I'm just interested to know whether any of the other execs have got any thoughts on this. So Lauren is asking there that there's a lot of work going on in the NQIG Directorate, and she's one of the culture advocates, and is interested to know about shared objectives that the exec are working on together to integrate work across the organisation, not just separately across each directorate. Tracey, I can see you've responded, but do any of the other exec team members on the panel have any thoughts on that question?
And I was just saying, it's sorry, Neil, that the discussions that we'd had was particularly around speaking up safely and driving the leadership style for the organisation that enables the culture. So just so that colleagues know. Sorry, thank you.
Yeah, it's a really important question and important point. So from an exec perspective, we're absolutely working on the basis that kind of less is more, and it's about being really focused on a couple of key things. So we've got clearly a clear kind of plan and way forward in terms of the stuff which is being looked at from a kind of organizational perspective. And as Barbara's alluded to, there are kind of differences in terms of directorate data as well. So clearly important that we kind of have both sides of the coin. The key for us now is kind of joining those together, and Susan's question around cultural advocates is key. We will be bringing our cultural advocates together quite frequently now in the new year, because they are really going to be key for us in terms of taking this work forward as well, and playing back to us the kind of good, the bad, and the ugly. There's some, as I said earlier, there's some kind of really good, brilliant stuff, but some areas which we know we need to get better in. So that kind of focus for us, and certainly around, as Tracey's alluded to, around kind of psychological safety, speaking up safely, they are kind of key areas for us when you look at the kind of culture data, our staff survey data as well. But from an exec perspective, kind of us really working together on those areas is going to be key, as well as those directorate actions as well.
Thanks, Neil. Paul, can I come across to you?
Yeah, thanks, Kaz. Yeah, no, I just want to pick up psychological safety, and I want to pick up speaking up safely from what both Tracey and Neil have said, because I think this is a huge area of work that the exec team has been really keen to sort out for the organisation. It's come up in staff surveys for a couple of years on the trot. How do we increase psychological safety so that people feel safe to speak up about issues that they see in the workplace, issues that affect them? And I think huge ground has been made. What I would like to say is that speaking up safety champions are being developed, will be given training, and will be in your directorate soon, so that you've got people within your teams that you can reach out to. People within our staff networks will be champions who you can look to, and our staff reps will also have champion roles amongst them as well. So we're trying to make people, through speaking up safely, more accessible to you. But the brilliance of the scheme is that you can submit speaking up safely issues anonymously through our intranet page, through SharePoint, and you can send them directly to me as well, and I'll process them for you. If you've got issues if you don't feel safe to say something within a line manager environment or above your line management environment, send it through to me as well, and it will be dealt with in accordance with the policy and correctly. So it's just those types of things that we're trying to introduce to reduce those barriers, those feelings of, if I do this, that might happen, or if I don't do this, that might happen. So hopefully that gives you some confidence.
That's great. Thank you, Paul. I'm going to come to a question that's in the chat that we've had from Emma. And Emma is asking whether the organisation has any insights into as to how culture is experienced differently within different geographical areas. Any immediate thoughts from anyone on the panel? Claire?
I haven't got the answer, but where it becomes obvious is when you've got teams that are doing similar things, for example, in one program, but are geographically separate, and you spot the makeup is different, the SOPs may be different, the way that services are delivered may be different, and then you start to get into different cultures then about how one may be performing better than another, rather than actually them working as one, because you haven't got any symmetry. And we all know through all of the lean stuff and the prudent healthcare stuff that we've done over the years, where you've got variation, it leads to problems, and then people start to feel disempowered, or that team's got more than me. So I'm sure, I haven't got any evidence in the survey itself around that, but I'm sure that if we focused our work on, reducing variation and providing more parity, then people feel as though they're part of the solution, rather than maybe feeling a little bit as though they maybe are being left behind. I think the other thing is that we do try and acknowledge that a lot of the work that we do is based in the south. So my team, for example, they have a lot in the south and the southwest. We recently did a culture session in Mid Wales, which meant it was equally horrible for everybody to travel to try and get to the metropole in Landry-Dot. But it was really important that we shared that it was really important that we met halfway, because I know we do our conference in the north as well. So I think we have to accept that still exists, but it is in our psyche, and we are trying to do more of it. So we're trying to do more exec walkabouts in broader parts of Wales, rather than it all being Cardiff centric, because I think, that is a risk for us as a team.
Thanks, Claire. Tracey, can I come to you?
I think it's a brilliant question. As you can see, I went, what a good question. I didn't have the answers, but I think we should actually do a little bit of work to understand that. Actually, before COVID, we talked about having a North Wales regional office that was actually really quite a substantive office. I don't mean going and buying an office. I mean having a centre point that was, much more used for meetings, for events, for bringing people together. I'm conscious that obviously meetings and engagements and the events happened all the time, but once a year staff conference isn't enough in bringing people together, and there's probably more bringing people together in South Wales than there is in North Wales. And I know every year with wonderful colleagues in North Wales, obviously we've got wonderful colleagues in South Wales as well, but don't want to create a competition. But people saying actually it would be really nice if we could kind of come together more, because it's so dispersed across North Wales. So I think that's a really important question that we need to have a little look into, and it may just be worth us just revisiting. Do we have a bit more of a centre for people to come together, and with the kind of North Wales estates changes, perhaps there's more of an opportunity to do that, whether it's Bangor or Wrexham. So maybe we could just take that away and look into that. But thanks for the question, Lauren.
Okay, thank you. Before I jump to Susan's question, which is in the chat, I've actually had a question just sent to me from somebody who would rather remain anonymous, if that's okay. So I'm just going to read this out to the execs on the call. So this colleague is asking, I was wondering how the exec team have assurance that what they are teaching leaders is actually being modelled throughout the organisation. It's easy for those reporting directly into the exec team to say what they would like to hear. So what steps do you take to really embed this all the way down and back up again? Tracey, I'll come straight to you.
I actually, so thank you so much for the question. I actually put a kind of similar thing into the message, which is, I'm always conscious that, we can talk and all violently agree, and then it doesn't necessarily reverberate through the organisation, nor necessarily do we have the most amazing ideas coming through, and I think it's a challenge. And I guess it's got a couple of things. Is Neil may want to come in. We've invested a lot of time for leaders and managers across the organisation to kind of sheep dip people through a leadership management academy, which I guess is centred around the cultural journey that we're trying to achieve, but also recognizing that in the NHS more broadly, we're not the only ones. People find themselves in roles where they are managing people in teams at varying sizes without necessarily have had any training on what good management looks like and what good leadership looks like. So there is something about ensuring that it's not just about announcing actions, it's making sure that we're actually equipping people through the culture and the environment and the priority areas for us, and if you like, a value-centered development. Because if they don't know what good looks like, what people will potentially are at risk of mirroring poor practice, poor leadership, poor management, poor culture, because other people haven't seen what good should look like. So there's something about that. The other thing is that's so why we do the culture pulse survey, because just because you're having a conversation with somebody in various roles in the organization doesn't make it so. And so how we get multiple ways of feedback, the cultural advocate's really key. Thank you for that suggestion. Let's have a joint meeting to really get under the skin of that. And I think our networks are a really good example, because through our networks we've been able to get many more voices heard, because there's different ways that people can influence, come together, share their views. So it's thinking about how do we do that then around culture, leadership and management. So maybe that's a really important conversation for us to have if we meet with as execs and the cultural advocates. But just to reinforce it, the culture pulse survey is key. But and I'm would be delighted to kind of drop into teams. I dropped into, I don't know if Ben or Tracey's on the call. I saw Tracey earlier, and the greener labs, which I keep referring to. A couple of weeks ago, and we met last week, a week before, didn't we? It's great to drop into teams to hear the stuff, but also hear feedback. So I think any of us as execs, please, if you want someone to come along to a Teams meeting to showcase what you're doing or to give some feedback, then just please reach out. So I'll stop because I'll ramble on otherwise. Thank you.
Thanks, Tracey. Claire, can I come to you, and then I'll come to you, Paul?
Yeah, I think it is about our relationships, isn't it? And how close we've got our ears to the ground as well. So we can do that through our directorates. So the work that I do in my directorate around the culture improvement work, we're really clear. I don't chair those meetings and my team chair them, because it's our culture. It's not my culture. It's not the SMT's culture. It's our culture. It's listening to what our colleagues want and what our teams want. So there's something around that. I think there's also an opportunity I can see in the chat around the leadership and management experience. And that is a great opportunity for us in terms of some of the work that Neil and Tracey have been talking around. But each of those cohorts has had an exec sponsor. And certainly when I've spent time with my cohort, I have heard, yeah, this is a great course, but actually we've still got bureaucracy. We've still got multiple layers of approval. So we get that local intelligence as well, not just from, putting on those events and taking people through those leadership journeys. But we also hear, actually, it's great for you to be here, Claire. Thank you very much for being the sponsor. But actually, it's still a bit pants in this part of the organisation, or we're still having to, we haven't got any feedback on this or that. And we're still having to, write multiple papers for approval on one small thing. So our ear to the ground on that is really helpful as well. So it's a bit of a two-way opportunity for us.
Thanks, Claire. Paul, did you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks, guys. It's a massive challenge, isn't it, to get the reality from the ground as to whether what we're trying to do with our leadership and our management structures is driving the right culture. So from next year, we're going to do some more board visits, but they're not going to be board visits that we've usually done, which is a pre-arranged visit where we come around and we have a look at what you're doing, meet some people, and you don't really get a chance to chat and work out what's going on. We're looking at a sort of a work experience based project next year where members of the board will come to services and spend half a day or a day working in the service with you, talking to people in your teams, with the hope that we can bridge that gap a bit and find out what's really going on, what really makes you happy or what really causes issues for you, and then what can we do about it to change it. I'd also say that through our LPF we have a great link with our staff representatives. The teams there are working really hard to connect through the reality of the culture on the ground. So if you can connect in through staff reps as well, anonymously or however you wish to, that's another way in to get that message through up to us in the exec team so that we could do something about it.
Thanks, Paul. I'm gonna pop across to the chat now and pick up on Susan's question around culture advocates. So the question here for the panel is, how can our exec team bring culture advocates into more of the work that they're doing? And are we utilising the advocates across the organisation? And if so, could they be a bit more visible? Tracey.
We've been having a whole chat about that in the chat bar. So yeah, so well, firstly, thank you so much to all our cultural advocates, and I'm conscious that we've kind of gradually rolled them out as well across the organisation, and so I'm sure, I know the cultural advocates come together, but it would be we've suggested that we meet as execs with the cultural advocates, because it would be and probably set that up as a kind of periodically, because as I said in the chat bar, like our staff networks who kind of give us a feel, and as I mentioned earlier, that's what the cultural advocates are there for as well. Really important, not only to help drive through, show signpost people, but actually provide that kind of leadership at a local level, but their intelligence to feed back to us as well about what's really happening. And that's the thing, isn't it? Back to the previous question. So really keen for us to hear the good, the bad and the ugly, but also hear from cultural advocates, what do you need of us? What's your ask for us as execs to do differently, more of the same? So really keen, and I think that's just kind of landed the reflection that whether it's quarterly or whatever, we probably need to set in train some links. I also think at some point with our wider leadership forum, it would be great for cultural advocates to join that as well, and have a session of wisdom from them as to how it feels, so more people can hear that. Thank you.
Thanks, Tracey. Apologies, Neil, I didn't see your hand was up, but can I come to you now?
No worries, guys, at all. So it was just to build on Matt's point in the chat for those who haven't seen it around the cultural advocates. An invite has gone out for all cultural advocates now for January and February, in terms of bringing that group together, sharing experiences, and really help us shape the next stages and the next steps around culture. So as Tracey's indicated there, we'll kind of, obviously, I think it's really important that first meeting is the kind of cultural advocate for you as a group to kind of come together, work out how you kind of want that to work, how we get the best out of it, and then absolutely we can kind of wrap that exec and leadership around it. And I just wanted to just one final point for me, Kaz, if I can. So the individual that kind of reached out to you directly, I think colleagues have kind of referenced the ways to kind of get in touch, but more than happy, kind of drop me an email. I'm more than happy to have a conversation with you if you feel kind of comfortable to do that. But equally, we are, in terms of our checks and balances, just want to kind of reiterate the kind of points for being made. We've got a kind of, our staff networks are key for us in terms of giving us that honest feedback, our trade unions, but obviously we've got all our data as well in terms of kind of exit interviews, our pulse surveys, staff survey, but actually getting out there, listening. And when we know, listen, we're not sat here going, everything is absolutely rosy in the garden. We're saying that this is a work in progress. There's some brilliant stuff happening, but there's absolutely more to do. And we are, as an exec team and as a leadership team, really committed to doing that in a way of having worked in a number of other kind of spaces in a way that I haven't experienced previously. And that gives me a huge amount of kind of warmth and confidence for the future in terms of where we want to get to.
Thanks, Neil. I can see there is a question in the chat about how culture is fed through the Leadership and Management Academy, but helpfully a link has been put in the chat to sort of answer that question. There is a comment in here, a comment/question from Emma, saying that Emma feels that we need to be a bit more explicit about how managers should manage and how leaders should lead. I'm just wondering whether the panel has any reflections on that. Neil?
Yeah, I'm happy, guys, just to kind of be brief on that. Now, kind of Tracey's touched on that in the comments there as well. So absolutely, and I think for us, we've got our kind of behavioural framework and kind of very kind of clear approach in terms of our kind of direction. I think for me, we have to recognise as well that people have different styles, different approaches, and one size doesn't fit all. For me, there's the kind of real basics around kind of compassion, around having difficult conversations, treating people, quite frankly, how you'd expect to be treated yourself. Some of this stuff for me isn't kind of rocket science, so we need to kind of go and read a kind of Harvard kind of business journal. It is about the kind of basic fundamentals about being kind of decent and as I say, treating people as you want to be treated. Absolutely, we will. And Paul referenced the kind of space we want to get to now for all our managers across Public Health Wales going into next year, to make sure that we provide more in this space, and are very kind of clear around how we work with trade unions, how we lead people, how we conduct return to work interviews. And that is a space that we will be getting into with all our line managers going into the next calendar year. And that will be kind of key for us as part of the work that we're doing around culture. So there's a balance, I think, but absolutely take those points on board in terms of looking at it through that lens. So helpful comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Neil. Tracey, can I come to you?
Yeah, I mean, I used to sheep dipping. I've said it, for years, how to, particularly over the last year, I guess, is how do we sheep dip people, accepting, Neil was saying everybody has different styles, so it's not about brainwashing, but what's the role of a manager around here? I think that's really important. So from a Public Health Wales perspective, what's expected of all of us as managers, rather than, people who join as a managerial role, whatever that means, with varying degrees of experience from a new managerial responsibility role through to, many years. So it's not saying that people aren't trained or experienced. It's about saying this is how we do it around here. And so I think that's really important for us, whether it's existing managers, particularly also for new managers coming through. And we're trying from a kind of policy, process, system stuff. And Paul's leading on what we call the operating framework. So it's just a one-stop shop on SharePoint. So if you kind of join the organisation, or if you're in anything, well, where the hell do I go with this? Because we do have a tendency to overly complicate. We were having a conversation in the chat bar about bureaucracy as well, which came up last week at the leadership forum, saying, we've got too much at the moment, we need to pare it all back. So there is something, I absolutely agree. What's the role of a manager in Public Health Wales? What's our style? What are our values? So I think that's something that we've really got to be driving through. And the second thing on these kind of questions that I just wonder, Neil, Kaz, colleagues, and I don't want to burden people with the surveys, but it would be great if we had, kind of cohort of our people across the organisation who kind of elected to receive mentees every now and again to say, what's your views on? How do we do this? Because it would be nice to get people's views like this. The whole chat is about people say, what about this? What about that? So I just wonder whether or not we can think about, and I don't mean doing it all the time, but maybe, for 3 or 4 times a year, just to say to people, what's your thoughts on this? How do we do that? So another way of kind of engaging people. But I agree with the sheep dipping. I don't know if everybody sheep dipped personally.
Thanks, Tracey. Claire, can I come to you?
Yeah, I think the other thing is, the Leadership Management Academy and the suite of offer that we have, I think it's really good. I think a lot of organisations don't have that, but we also know the opportunity that mentorship and coaching brings to people. And we had the lovely Abby to our SMT yesterday. I'm sure I saw her on the call, but I can't see her now. But there's so many little faces to talk about the mentorship work that people in OD are doing, and how people can sign up as mentors and mentees. And we've also got some trained coaches across the organisation now that we know can always add value to managers, leaders, and people who don't manage and lead, but people who just want and expect good management and leadership. So there's that as an offer as well. And I think, that we need to grow that, because it's a completely different offer, but it does build resilience. It allows people to build the skills to challenge poor management and leadership as well, in a way that, they're coached to do, so they don't feel vulnerable.
Thanks, Claire. That's great. There's a question from Diane around culture advocates in the chat, and Diane is asking, is there a plan for further culture advocates to be trained?
So absolutely, I think if there's an appetite for that. Obviously, we've got a cohort at the moment, and as we've indicated, bringing them together now for the new year. But 1,000,000%, I think, from our perspective, the more the merrier in terms of that community, given the power and the impact that they can have. So I'll pick that one up offline, and we will absolutely, where we can, in terms of making that happen, we will do that. So please do reach out. Matt's obviously got his details in the chat there as well. I'm sure he's shouting at the team's call as I'm saying this, but reach out to Matt as well if it is something that you would be keen to get involved with. Then, as I said, the more the merrier.
I'm just going to jump, if I can, to one of the questions we got submitted to in advance. I'm just aware of time. It's just an interesting question that one of our colleagues has asked about how are we keeping track of what different parts of Public Health Wales are doing to improve workplace culture? Is there a coordinated view of what's working and what feedback has come up from those local initiatives?
So I'm happy, Kaz, to pick that one up, colleagues, if you're happy.
Thanks, Neil.
That I do. So yes is the answer. We're obviously, in terms of those conversations and discussions at the exec, we had a really good session last month where we shared good practice, the things that were going well, the things that weren't going so well, a really honest discussion in the room there. And obviously what we're doing is sharing the stuff that is working well and saying, look, actually, we think that could be kind of used within all directorates. That's something we could kind of scale up. So it's about learning those kind of things locally in terms of what is happening. We've also got obviously our integrated engagement action plans, which has got not just what we're doing as a kind of organizational lens, but also what's happening from a directorate perspective as well. And that kind of read across there to look at what is being done as being key, and clearly what is now happening as part of the regular surveys and that feedback is we can then evaluate the impact that these things are having. Some stuff is kind of live and done very quickly with kind of QR codes, so we're able to kind of check in with teams and directorates. Okay, how does it feel? Kind of, is that kind of making the difference? Is it having the impact that we'd like it to do? So and as I say, and kind of finally, as part of our mid-year reviews that all exec directors have with Tracey, the expectation, Tracey is absolutely holding execs to account in terms of, right, okay, this is your data, what is happening, what's going well, why have we seen a kind of a downturn there, what are you doing to address that? So the accountability around this in the kind of right way and in a kind of supportive way, but also holding that mirror up is key and crucial to this as well.
Thanks, Neil. Claire, can I come to you and then I'll come to you, Tracey?
Yeah, I'm conscious of time, but as Neil said, we shared some of the work that we've been doing, and not one size fits all. And we've been doing quite a lot of work in my directorate, specifically on what works for my directorate, and then how do we then roll that out to see what, it's a bit like a pick and mix, isn't it? That would work for you, that would work for me. And so one of the things that we've really found helpful in NQuIG is it's just gone from my head. But the Lumina Sparks work that we've been doing that some people would be familiar with, which is about, how we behave under pressure, what our tendencies are, what our strengths are, and how that helps us work within our team or more broadly. And we've started to put where we feel comfortable that on our sort of signature or on our links on our team. So I noticed it yesterday on some of my teams, which was, this is a little bit about me. This is my profile. This is how I like to interact with people. I don't mind if you ring me when I'm green, because that's what my Lumina Sparks tells me about myself. But for some people, ring me but not when I'm green is not quite right for them because they've carved that time out to do some prep work. So how do we capture those nuggets that will help us to interact more broadly with other directorates so people get to know us a little bit better? So that was just one example of where, we're trying to find things in directorates that might work more broadly, but won't, as Neil says, one size won't fit all.
Thanks, Claire. Aware of time, we've got 1 minute until the end of the meeting. But Tracey, can I come to you to give your reflections on that?
Yeah, just on that, as Neil said, we have quite extensive conversations about culture at the mid-year reviews, directorate reviews. We're just finishing the round and they'll be shared with everybody. So I think everyone who's done them so far will have sent it out to each directorate, but we'll put them all on the internet. So you'll see that there's a slide that really shows what each team has been doing. And it really does feel different from last year. The focus is very different. So just to say that, Cass, thanks.
Okay. Okay, well, we're just coming towards the end of the course, so I just wanted to say quickly before I hand back to Tracey, just as a quick sum up, is that these sort of regular updates are going to continue. The questions, if we haven't got to you, I apologise, but we will make sure they are published and answered on the intranet. And just a reminder to everybody that the next time with Tracey is on Monday, the 26th of January. So thank you all for joining. Tracey, do you want to just sum up or share any thoughts before we close the meeting?
26th of January. How did that happen? Flipping it. Yeah, just to say, Kaz, thank you for chairing it brilliantly, and thanks for colleagues answering questions. But actually, most importantly, thanks for everybody who had 118 at one point, and the really valuable comments in the chat bar. I mean, I guess it's a question: is should we be doing this kind of once a quarter? Because this meeting in its own right can kind of say, no, it's not working. Yes, it's working. So there's been some really helpful suggestions that we can take away and some of them to action and some to think through in the chat bar. So thanks, everybody. Look, I've really enjoyed it. I think, maybe finish where I start. It's our organisation. We all have a right to feel that we can contribute to how we shape our working environment and culture, and being supported and feel safe to do so. Yeah, I'm for one really keen. If there's other suggestions, and just drop me an email. Happy to get on a Teams with individuals or with teams. And I know exec colleagues are as well. So don't want to prolong it too much. To say, fab to see everybody. And if I don't see, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I'm going to, because you just said January 26th is obviously if you don't see everybody. Paul saying don't go there over the festive season, and we'll see you in the new year. I had to get that one out. Oh, I can't believe. But thanks so much, everyone. Really great to see you all. And maybe you ask everyone to pop your cameras on before you head off. And thank you so much for your time and your words of wisdom as well. Take care. Diolch yn fawr. Hwyl fawr.
Bye.
Bye.
Well.